Hello again. Welcome back. Today, we're discussing where you can actually get miniatures and all the different sources that sell them. So there are a lot of different places that you can get your miniatures from. There's plenty of places. I'm sure you've known at least two companies that make them. Games Workshop and WizKids, which are the bread and butter of any friendly local gaming store. But despite what those companies might want you to believe, there are actually, in fact, quite a lot of different companies out there making figures for us to paint, and of different genres and intentions behind them as well. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to be discussing all these different companies and the things about them that may be in your interest or may not be. Let me go ahead and say right now that I am not sponsored in any way by any of these companies. I'm just talking about them because I think they're interesting, or I know about them, or I think you should know about them. Nor is it meant to be exhaustive. I'm sure there's people I don't know about. So go ahead and take it as you will. So the first company we're going to be talking about in this regard is Games Workshop and WizKids, which I'm lumping together simply because they are so present. Now, you already know about Games Workshop, I'm assuming. They know Warhammer 40k and they know Age of Sigmar. Now, I think that both Age of Sigmar and 40k make good figures. However, they are very restricted to their genres. Age of Sigmar is a very extreme, high-level sculpting with a lot of over-the-topness to them. May not be what you're looking for. And WizKids is cheap. That's all I'll say about them. But there are other companies. If your game store is mildly large, you may have seen the company Reaper in their catalogs. Reaper is a US company that is making a lot of D&D figures. That's their main thing, is Dungeons and Dragons as their genre. And they make tons of stuff. They have possibly the largest amount of sculpts available. That's what we call the models. We call them sculpts. They have possibly the most amount of sculpts in the entire industry. I think they have like over 800 or something sculpts in their Bones line alone. That's bonkers. That's not including their metal line or the new 3D printed line, the resin line. There are so many in there. And the range that they come in terms of quality can be a little wild. Now, I have a number of them myself. I have used, I got this little Skelly Man. I've got this Witch Lady as an examples. And I have this Knight guy I painted a long time ago. And the thing about these Reaper Bones miniatures specifically is that they're made of a PVC plastic, which is just open enough that it can receive paint and just be painted directly. And the big advantage with PVC figures is that they are completely invulnerable to being dropped or stepped on. They are pliable, they move, they don't have anything that can break on them. They're very, very tough. The downside, of course, of that is that they are very bendy. They have swords and spears that will bend when they are pushed up against things. They are always a little bit soft, and they don't take to detail very well, which means they look kind of muddy in terms of their sculpting. They're not very good for personal miniatures, as in your characters, but they are very effective for your enemy miniatures that you're going to be playing on your TTRPGs, like goblins or whatever, because they're only going to be on the table for a few minutes before they die. So they're good for filling out your collection, no doubt. If you're looking for a slightly higher quality than Reaper is producing, then I definitely recommend Dark Sword Miniatures as a very good source for finding your own personal TTRPG Special Snowflake character models. Dark Sword is a company that is taking a lot of inspiration from classical American fantasy artists. Things like Tony Dilleriti, things such as Larry Elmore, Game of Thrones, tons of a lot of classical D&D illustrators. And so they tend to be hand sculpted of a very high quality and are very receptive for high quality paint jobs. Like I did this little mage woman. See here? Pretty neat. I really, really like Darksword. They have some of the best quality D&D miniatures that I think you can get. Age of Sigmar and Warhammer Fantasy tend to be a little extreme and limited to their genres a bit more than Darksword is. Whereas Darksword has models that can fit into a lot larger of a sphere of ideas, such as this Metzicotl? Hachicotl? Scythe chick, which looks freaking sick, and from a newer line of their resin figures. Most of their figures tend to be in metal, which can be a little bit antagonistic to work with. They are very hard and they don't glue well together. They are a little annoying in that regard. So metal, I'm not super happy about, but the models they are very good. I definitely recommend them for that. Weird. Weird is an interesting company. They are making the skirmish game Magiflu, which is steampunky dark fantasy skirmish war game. It's something that I've tried looking into, but their sculpts are what I'm more interested in, and they are definitely different than what a lot of people are doing. The weird lineup tends to be a little bit more focused on the painterly side of things. Thus, they are much more devoted to lots of detail and interesting effects that you can go wild with, making a smaller warband of higher quality. I really like their sculpts. The ideas behind the sculpts are very good. I like this Asian dude here. This guy's pretty cool. However, they are very, very small. They are almost accurate to the box here. And they can be very challenging to paint well because the details, like the faces, are so tiny that they tend to be swallowed up in the light and can be very challenging to get a well-rendered piece. But they do look very good when they are done correctly. So I definitely like them for that. They also have the dark steampunk vibe, which is not a huge thing that I'm into, but some people really like that kind of thing, and that genre definitely deserves to be represented. Creature Caster. I really enjoy Creature Caster quite a lot. This is a Canadian company that is creating a lot of demon models, mostly as proxies for Warhammer 40k and Age of Sigmar demons. So they have their Nurgle demons, they have their Tzeentch demons, they have their Slaanesh demons, they have their Khorne demons, all of the right diameter bases, so you can proxy them right in very easily. It's good. They are very well rendered pieces. So some of the highest detail that is available in the industry. I myself have painted a number of Creature Caster models, like this here Elish Norn model that I have done. This is I'm quite happy about how this piece turned out. And there is certainly quite a lot of things going on with these sculpts. Tons of feathers, tentacles, little details, teeth. They love teeth on their sculpts. And it is a joy to work with simply the amount of things that are available. A lot of creativity in their sculpts as well. Now, the only downside to them, as far as I see it, other than these sculpts being somewhat expensive simply because there's so much going on, but less so than Games Workshop is, the only thing I would say is a downside is that the larger, more interesting models can be quite complicated and difficult to set together. There is a lot of things that have to be joined together, there's a lot of connection points, there's a lot of gap filling and edges that have to be sanded down. The production quality is quite good on them. I actually think they're doing some of the best resin castings in the business. But that doesn't exclude the fact that they are complicated. I got the King of Mosfa, which was a incredibly detailed and elaborate piece, and yeah, it's gonna be a nightmare to get this put together. in short. And I don't think they're very friendly for beginners who are just looking to get something cool. Unless you have your dad around to assemble it for you and do all the hard work. This is going to be a challenge, and I would definitely recommend staying away from the more complicated and varied kits until you're a little bit more experienced with them in general and how everything puts together, because they don't come with instructions. They do have instructions, but they are gonna be hard even with them. If simply because that everything kind of shifts when they do the resin casting, and you'll have to move things around in order to get them to fit together. Then you'll have to fill in the gaps and do all the mold lines, and it's gonna be an event just to get the thing ready, let alone painting the things. But in that regard, they're very good competition pieces, and their Resin Beast competition is very cool and rewarding. So as we go through this list, you will notice that we are going from gaming-oriented models to more painterly focused models that are not so much for a purpose of gaming, but more just to be displayed and shown in cases or as gifts for people. This is intentional, because while the gaming models have a purpose outside of just being viewed for fun, the display models will be usually higher quality in terms of the casting and the production. They will be more expensive because they have more R&D put into the sculpting and the production itself, and they will be a lot more artistically interesting, or just more in the thing that I like, so they're better. So let's begin by talking about our very well-established company, Pegaso and Chimera. I'm putting the two together simply because Pegaso owns Chimera as a subsidiary, and they are kind of doing the same kind of stuff. So, Pegaso and Chimera. Pegaso and Chimera are a European company that are making a lot. They're very well established. They've been doing it for many, many years. One of the longest running companies, if I remember correctly. And they do a lot of historical models, along with a great deal of fantasy models. Chimera is their fantasy subsect that they run. And the historics are very good. I don't really care for historics personally, since I'm more interested in impressionistic painting styles, which have a lot of color to them. Not so much of the classicalism, where it's very focused on realism and smoothness. It's not really my kind of thing. But the overall quality of their sculpts is definitely no slouch at all. They are very well made, to the point that... Let's take a look at one of them right now. They are certainly for painters, you can tell, because as I'm cracking open this Asteria model, this comes with a flag. And there is no sculpted details on the flag, which means you get to do whatever you want. Now, some people might like having the sculpted details because they don't have a lot of painting experience, so you just fill in the lines. Personally, I like having blank flags so I can put in whatever I want. And that's definitely a sign that this is meant for a painter, not necessarily a wargamer. Not only is the scale facilitating more of a painting style, the fact that they are leaving this open space for people to put their own stuff onto shows that they are going for a more painterly audience. The casting quality on these is very, very good. Excellent, I would say. There's almost no mold lines on these pieces, which means I don't have to do a lot of work in terms of getting from the preparation priming stage to the actual painting stage, which is good. I don't like having to do that. And it seems like none of the people who are running these companies are interested in doing that either. So you're getting some of the right perspective from the people who are making them, that they don't want to do that work either. So they're going to do it for you. Scale 75. I have mixed feelings on Scale 75. Not because the sculpts or anything are bad. I actually rather like them. But they have a very interesting outside, for me, from my outside perspective, I feel that Scale 75 has a very strange kind of genre that they are going for. They have a lot of historics, and they have a fair amount of fantasy. And their models are definitely very good. I have no doubt of their casting quality. However, I think their historics tend to be a little bit on the overly realistic side of things. In terms of at least the way they paint them. They are somewhat in between the genre of scale modeling and scale painting. So I'm somewhat mixed on how I view them, because I'm not much of a fan of historics. But they're certainly very, very good. I can't tell. They are all going to be in sale, as the company name suggests, 75mm scale or larger, with a emphasis on historics, a lot of like military kind of things, here like people from hero like legend and such. They also distribute Chimera within the US. They have a US subsidiary called Scale 75 USA, as the Scale 75 in Europe is different. They also tend to have a relaxed sensation in their paintings, with characters that are not doing very bombastic things, and a little bit more on the relaxed side of sensations. Interesting, to say the least. Worth considering. Big Child. Big Child. Just like me. I quite like Big Child. They have a lot of science fiction and fantasy figures from Spain, and they tend to have a slightly different, more cartoony approach towards their sculpts in general. Now, they have plenty of well-realized fantasy and science fiction pieces that are not leaning towards a more exaggerated style, no doubt. But they do have a lot of more cartoony, funny sculptures with a little bit more artistic freedom in their designs. They have a lot of Scale 75 models, but also a fair amount of very interesting science fiction line models. Not science fiction fantasy, if I'm being honest, science fantasy models in their Celestial line, which I am very interested in. I really like them quite a lot. Journeyman miniatures. Journeyman is doing some interesting things nowadays with their product line, and I am really all for it. They are taking a lot of inspiration from modern classical art in a similar way of Dark Sword, and trying to push the idea of miniatures as a art form more than just a subsidiary gaming kind of thing, which is something I'm all for. And their models are very good. They have a lot of high quality centerpiece models that I am all a fan of. Their Morgan is really interesting and huge. I had the opportunity to see it in person when I went to Adepticon, and it was massive. They have a bunch of artwork that is inspired by Paul Bonner, which is a very well-known artist within the gaming community, as he did artwork for both Games Workshop and Shadowrun, the TTRPG. Always a noteworthy contribution. And I have their 6 scale Shinobi piece right now. And this is just one piece of them. And as you may be able to see, there is actual texture to these pieces. Perhaps in the shadows it's a little bit more visible. There's actual texture on these pants. Really interesting. Very, very cool. I really like the scale of these models because they allow you to get really into the details and present a really well done piece. I'm not really sure if I like how this bevel here is. It's a little odd in how it's going to be presented. But overall, very cool. I really like the fact that there are companies nowadays that are doing artwork that is based on things that people are more familiar with. Because it also, again, pushes the idea of miniatures as a art piece rather than just some weird gaming thing. And that's something I'm always a fan of. Speaking of which, we'll talk about one of my new favorite companies, MINDWORK Games. MINDWORK Games, again, is doing another similar thing with as Journeyman is and as Darksword is, with making models that are inspired directly by classical fantasy. In this case, they're taking a lot of work from Brahm and Frank Frazetta and Patrick J. Jones, which is one of the best Frazetta-esque painters living today. And their models tend to be very, very accurate. They are extremely well made. Like this here sacrifice model, which I got from Adepticon. Number 264 out of 600. Limited runs thing is a little bit annoying for me because that means, you have to, there's a little bit of FOMO, but the actual piece itself is excellent. I'm actually having trouble right now looking at it, really finding anything that needs to be fixed on this. Like there's a couple of injection zones and such, but overall, this thing doesn't have nary a single mold lines on here, which means that I get to do everyone's favorite thing, get straight into painting without having to do a lot of preparation work. That's something that you get when you have really high quality sculpting and really high quality casting. Yeah, I am a huge fan of their designs and how they're adapting the work of these fantasy artworks into miniature form. Sometimes they do some different things in order to make the piece actually work as a miniature, but overall the pieces are amazing and fantastic. I just like the variety of genre that they are able to get from all these different fantasy artists in general. They also sell prints, which is something that I'm a fan of. If you liked this video, please consider liking and subscribing. You can always ask any questions you have in the comments down below, and please consider checking out my website, where you can see a portfolio of my work, and if you really, really liked my work, consider getting yourself a commission. Take care, and have a good one.